Well, thank you very much, everybody. What a Kalispera, I should say. Thank you very much, everybody. What a pleasure to be here. What an honor to be invited to speak to the Thessaloniki Metropolitan Summit. And fantastic to be back in Greece after a very short gap, because I've spent most of the summer here. Actually, Greece is virtually my second home now. And wonderful, particularly to be here in Thessaloniki, because as you all know, it was here, or hereabouts, or just down the road in Potidaea, in fact, what was called Potidaea, that the Peloponnesian War broke out in 432 BC. And do you remember this? I remember reading about it in the pages of Thucydides when I was about 11 years old. And it was obvious to me, reading Thucydides avidly, as we all do, that the Athenians were the good guys. I'm sorry to say this, the Athenians were the good guys. They were the democrats, the pluralists, the freedom lovers, the artists, the poets, philosophers. And it was clear to me, reading Thucydides at the height of the Cold War, that we in the Western Alliance, Greece, Britain, America, NATO as a whole, we were in a sense the true heirs of Pericles. Because our opponents in the Warsaw Pact were not just oligarchic, the Soviet Warsaw Pact, but also repressive and totalitarian, with an appalling record on human rights. And they were therefore, those guys, were therefore the direct ideological descendants, in my view, age 11, of Sparta, which, according to Thucydides, was nasty and militaristic and closed. Oligarchic people subsisted on a diet of olive stones and gristle. Spartan educational system alternated between organized pederasty, throwing children into freezing rivers, a bit like a 1970s English prep school, except far, far, far worse. And so all my life, I've believed in this distinction, this Karl Popper's distinction between open societies and closed societies, and between autocracies and democracies. And today, for the first time since the end of the Cold War, we're starting to see the same sort of adversarial lineup between the rival teams. Did anybody see that photo the other day from Beijing, that sort of Addams Family photo of Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, a few of the stans, and coming to them. And you look at that rogues gallery, and you seriously think, come on, Xi Jinping, is that the best you can do? Is that club of autocrats really going to rival the West? Won't it be obvious to the rest of the world, looking at that group, that they're going to be better off aligned with us, with the democracies? Well, I've got to tell you, I really wish it was so obvious. Because that group also tragically, as somebody just said, includes India, the world's largest democracy. And I think we all understand the diplomatic and indeed the historic reasons why Narendra Modi decided to go. I've got to tell you, it still feels painful to see India there. Just as frankly, it feels painful to see India still buying so much Russian oil. But I just got to accept that what seems obvious to me doesn't seem obvious to our Indian friends. And by the way, it may seem obvious to me and to posterity who the good guys were in the Peloponnesian War, the Democrats, right? Mainly thanks to Thucydides. But it wasn't at all obvious at the time. And Potidaea, which I mentioned earlier, by the way, Potidaea did revolt in 432 BC, but Potidaea is about 37 miles away from here. Potidaea was revolting against Athens, my friends. And as I'm sure you've all been thinking ever since I began this speech, the unfortunate fact about any analogy between our times and the Peloponnesian War, what's the unfortunate fact? The democracy is lost, right? Athens lost. And Pericles himself was overwhelmed by the plague, just as in the recent hysteria over COVID in some other great modern leaders were tragically deprived of office by their own backbenchers, to put it diplomatically. And we all know from historically, from the defeat of the Athenians at Aigos Potami in 404 BC, through to the collapse of the Roman Republic in the 1st century BC, to the tragedy of Europe in the 1930s, there is absolutely nothing fated or inevitable about the triumph of democracy. And that is why the challenge that we all face today is so intense. And that is why my message to you this evening is that we've all, frankly, got to be a lot stronger in standing up for our values at home and around the world. And when we in Britain arrest comedians for stray remarks on Twitter, as we've been doing, and when free speech is actively being suppressed in American campuses and American academics are being told by government what they can and cannot teach, we have to understand, I'm afraid, that we are making terrible strategic mistakes that can be twisted by our enemies. And there was a headline in the Daily Mail this week. You read the Daily Mail. Alistair, you know the Daily Mail.
I know it, I don't read it.
It's a wonderful paper. You should read. I write for the Daily Mail, Alistair. It's a wonderful paper. I venerate the Daily Mail. But there was a headline in the Daily Mail this week, such as the anxiety about free speech in the UK. There was a headline saying, "Are we turning into North Korea?" This is the UK. And you look, I mean, as I say, I absolutely love and venerate the Daily Mail. I write for the Daily Mail. But that is clearly one of those Daily Mail headlines that is a question expecting the answer no, right? Like, is Elvis still alive? You have on the front of the Daily Mail. Or are crop circles made by aliens? Or can you really cure baldness by rubbing your head with tarra masalata? That's a sort of question you get in the health section of the Daily Mail. And the answer, this is a question expecting the answer no, right? And no, my country is nothing like North Korea, nothing like North Korea. Because if you say something that the government doesn't like in North Korea, then you risk being shot or strapped to the front of a howitzer and blown up. And, frankly, there are repressions, perhaps not as extreme, but similar repressions in virtually all of the countries that met this week in Beijing. And it is absolutely ridiculous and shameful to hear people compare Britain to those regimes. But it is the idiotic blunders that we are making that are allowing those comparisons to be made. And so my message to you is, folks, we've just got to be more morally and intellectually robust in sticking up for freedom, and for the freedoms that have been so hard won over such a long time. Freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom to buy and sell as you please, free trade, freedom to elect whomsoever you choose to office, freedom of the people to remove that person from office, which, by the way, is one of the problems of the European Union. Leave that on the side. Democratic freedom. Because that, frankly, is the difference between Russia and Ukraine. In Russia, people more or less know who's going to win the election, don't they? In Ukraine, it was a matter of genuine doubt. Just as, by the way, it was a matter of genuine doubt in the United States of America. I was in Washington on polling day. Most people in Washington thought Kamala Harris was going to win, right? You wouldn't find that sort of ambiguity in Moscow, in Beijing, in Iran, or Pyongyang. Got me? That's the difference. And it's very, very important. And it grieves me right now that we're not doing more and more urgently to support the heroic Ukrainians, because their fight for their independent democracy will, I think, go down as the decisive conflict of the early 21st century. And I remain convinced that they're gonna win, but we must do more to shape the outcome of this war, because this war will shape the world for decades to come. I can tell you, I've just been in Taiwan. Who's been to Taiwan? It's an absolutely fascinating place, and they're very, very apprehensive. But one of the extraordinary facts about Taiwan is that they now make more than 95% of the microprocessors, more than 95% of the microprocessors that are essential for advanced AI. And let me ask you, how many in this room use ChatGPT? That's no disgrace. I do. Does anybody use ChatGPT? Anybody tried using ChatGPT? Anybody use AI? Well, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love the speed, the intelligence of ChatGPT. I love its amazing flattery. You know, ChatGPT always tells me how brilliant I am or how brilliant my questions are, and I love that. You know, it's sort of got a fantastically deferential attitude. But you know, I really ask you, sorry, I really ask you, that's not going to get rung by London here. I really ask you, do you want control of those absolutely vital microprocessors, those chips that are essential for AI? Do you want them shortly to be under the control of communist China? Because I certainly don't. And that is what, and do you want China to have control of the whole first island chain and to be able to project power right out into the Pacific, as they surely will if and when they get hold of Taiwan? Is that what the world wants? I don't want that. But that is what one of the consequences of a disaster in Ukraine could be and would be. That's what would happen, I think, if Ukraine goes down. And so the whole world is looking at how we are handling this. And they're looking at it in the Gulf, in Latin America, in sub-Saharan Africa. And these are all swing voters, right? Swing voters. They could go either way. They could be with us, or they could be with the other guys. And they can see what's at stake. And they can see that really what's going on is a gigantic arm wrestle between so-called Western values and the values of the autocrats. And to be brutally frank, they are finding it harder to make up their minds about who to back than they were 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. And that's why we've got to be far more confident about ourselves and the massive advantages of our democratic, freedom-loving systems. And, you know, you look at that. I was just being asked about this on Greek TV, I think. That group in Beijing, they have a sizable, they have a lot of people. Maybe if you add in India, about a third of the world's population. But ask yourselves this question, my friends. Which group, NATO area, Greece, UK, Europe, North America, has the highest per capita GDP? Us by absolutely miles. Which has the biggest life expectancy? Which has the highest quality of life? Us by a country mile. And let me ask you, in conclusion, you know, here in Greece, this country which first produced a university, any kind of university, the Stoa Poikile in Athens, where will you find the greatest universities in the modern world with the most breakthroughs and the most Nobel Prizes? The places, by the way, where the autocrats in China, in Tehran, want to send, in Beijing, actually turn out want to send their own kids. Because those universities are not in Moscow or Pyongyang or Tehran. They're in places like Athens or London. They're in the West. And ask yourself which this country produced the first theatre, the first comedy, the first tragedy, right? invented it. Would the world rather watch Hollywood movies, which are still made according, by the way, to Aristotelian norms, or would they rather watch Chinese movies? In the discos and nightclubs of this planet, are people strutting their funky stuff to Russian techno-funk and Chinese hip-hop? Are you all, after this splendid dinner, going to go out into the boîte de nuit of Thessaloniki and groove to Iranian dubstep? You are not, are you? You're not. And there is a reason why K-pop from South Korea is infinitely more popular with young people around the world than martial music from North Korea. And it's the same reason why tourists to this day are tramping in their millions to see the incomparable architectural legacy of Athens, when Sparta, to get back to the controversial point with which I began, Sparta has left nothing behind. Sparta, which won, has left nothing behind but a few courses of rubble. Yes? Apologies to any Spartans here. Are there any Spartans here? Very heartfelt apologies then. But, you know, where is the Spartan legacy in philosophy or mathematics or poetry or drama? Where is it? It's negligible, I'm afraid, by comparison with Athens, with what was produced by Athenian democracy. And that is because art, culture, philosophy, scientific, commercial innovation of all kinds will always do better where people are free to say what they choose and do and live as they choose, provided they do no harm to others. And that's what goes on basically in Thessaloniki, in Athens, and London, and New York, and in our free societies. And that is why I believe that the values of those societies will prevail. And all it will take for freedom to succeed is for the governments and the people of those societies to stop being so timid and actually to show that they believe in freedom. So let that be the message from this wonderful conference: confidence in our democratic Western values inherited from Greece. Go forth and multiply and explain that message to the rest of the NATO nations. Thank you very much, everybody, for having me along tonight. And I will do my best now to answer Mr. Marinakis' questions. Thank you.